Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Season 5 of Lost. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review each season of one of my all-time favorite shows, Lost. Spoiler warning for the entire series of Lost as I talk about the season in detail and in comparison to the rest of the series. So, Season 5 of Lost is where, for good or for ill, the show completely changed direction. For the first 4 seasons, the bulk of the main storyline takes place on the island, going day by day, chronicling a group of people who survived a plane crash on a mysterious island, where in the first 4 seasons covers a period of 100 days. However, in Season 5, the group splits in half, where part of the survivors have made it off the island and are in the real world 3 years in the future. And Season 5 starts off by showing the group that stayed behind on the island shortly after the other group left. But midway through the season, that storyline will jump 3 years into the future as well. So in WatchMojo.com's video they did on the top 10 jumping the shark moments in TV, time travel on Lost was on that list. And although I disagree with a lot of WatchMojo.com's conclusions, their top 10s are voted upon by their viewers, so I can't deny that this is a common perception amongst the general public that when time travel was introduced into Lost, it's when the show jumped the shark. Although I agree that the last 2 seasons of Lost were not as good as the first 4 seasons, I wouldn't call time travel jumping the shark necessarily. As part of it I felt was absolutely amazing. However, other parts of it I had a bit of a problem with, so could see how one might see it as jumping the shark. So the season began with 2 episodes I simply found amazing. No one knew what would happen to the group that stayed behind on the island. Over the break between seasons, the producers hinted at time travel and that some of the main characters would find themselves in the time of the Dharma Initiative. So in the opening scene of the season, we were following a mysterious man. I knew it was Marvin Candle, and I wasn't too shocked to see Daniel Faraday in Dharma times as well. That being said, it was still an absolutely amazing and awesome way to start the season, and what followed was absolutely amazing. So the entire group of survivors on the island are stuck in a trap where the island travels through time at any given moment at any given time period, and this was great to see. We got to see Yimmy's beach plane crash on the island, Ethan shoot Locke, and Faraday have a chat with Desmond from the hatch. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a sci-fi nerd and I love time travel stories, but I was in an absolute state of euphoria when watching these 2 episodes. And off island, we take off right where we left off at the flash forwards in Season 4. Finally, which in turn takes place shortly after the flash forwards we saw way back in the Season 3 finale. And I found these scenes just as amazing. Jack and Ben were on a mission to get everybody back on the island. Saeed and Hurley were being hunted by some dudes with dart guns. Sun was meeting with Woodmore about killing Ben. And the lawyer was threatening to take Aaron away from Kate. I know a few people didn't care much for the Oceanic Six storyline this season, but me personally, I found it absolutely amazing. The one scene when Hurley is at the gas station buying clothes and then drives off, and just as he drives off, Kate pulls into the gas station. I felt that whole scene was amazing. All these scenes gave me, gave the whole sense of interconnectedness that they used to have in the flashbacks of Season 2, but in a new and interesting way by having them take place in present times. And instead of boring flashbacks or boring flash forwards, we just went back and forth from the island to off the island, and I found these, it was just great to watch. It was a fresh new look to the show that it really needed. I felt the first 3 episodes of Season 5 were by far the best beginning to a season that Lost had ever had, by far. However, I still had a few problems with it. I talked about in my Season 3 review how the show liked to use the excuse of the island did it, so they could do convenient things with the plot. Well, in Season 3 I said it wasn't so bad, but it got worse later on. Well, here's where it got much worse. To say that the island was traveling in time isn't really accurate, as it was only the people from at the 815 survivors camp and Locke who traveled through time. Everyone else stayed behind on the island and were in normal time for those 3 years. In particular, the whole others camp with that Locke was in when the jump first happened, they stayed behind, but Locke traveled back in time. And also Claire, who ran off somewhere, stayed in present times as well. No real explanation other than the island did it was given. And I'm sorry, but that's horseshit. It's obvious that the writers just wanted certain characters to travel back and others not to, so they just said, oh, the island did it, which is just lazy writing. If they wanted to do that, they should have put a group of people who they wanted to travel back in time at a geographical location together, like say near the Orchid Station, and they could easily explain that that's why only they traveled back in time, because they were close to the center of the disturbance. But no, they had Locke travel back in time even though he was with the others. And by the way, I was really pissed off that they teased Locke being the leader of the others at the end of Season 4, but then magically just make them disappear as soon as Season 5 starts. And then kill him off before he could actually become their leader. That was really frustrating. Another problem I had with these first set of episodes was something I mentioned in my review of Season 4, where at the end of the series, Lost was going kill crazy with the minor background characters, and how I feel this makes the whole point of having them in the first place useless. Here we get the arrow attack by the 1950s others that conveniently kills all of the background characters, leaving only characters we know. It's obvious that the writers just wanted to get rid of them, and I did not appreciate that. Again, this would have been fixed if they did my suggestion of having a group of people near the Orchid time travel. That way, the background characters would stay in present time, so they'd be out of the way. You wouldn't have to deal with them without killing them. And, you know, they could mostly stay out of the way for the remainder of the series, but serve some sort of purpose towards the end game. Like, for example, them becoming the new civilization on the island that Hurley would rule over, which would be a new, better version of the others. That would have been awesome, and that would have given these nameless background characters a purpose. But simply killing them off, not only did it make their whole existence pointless, it also helped build to the notion that the island is a very dangerous place, and it's not somewhere you'd like to go. You know, somewhere if you go to, you die. Where we're sold as a place where miracle happens, but it seems like it's a death trap. But other than that, these first 3 episodes were fantastic, and my mind was completely blown with how awesome this series had become. Seeing Mrs. Hawkins brought back as an important character was as awesome as it was shocking. And the whole storyline with the 1950s, where we see Charles Widmore as a teenager, in the scene where Richard Alpert sees Locke as an infant right after he was born, was paid off. Again, simply amazing. After the next set of episodes were great, but not amazing. It paid off the Oceanic Six returning to the island a lot sooner than expected, because typically Lost likes to really drag things out. So I was expecting to have to wait until the end of the season to see the Oceanic Six return to the island, but it happened sooner than that. Although I'm not a gigantic fan of the way we saw them get on the plane, only from Jack's perspective. So we still had no idea why Kate, Hurley, and Saeed got on the plane, and what had happened to Ben when he went to run his errands, which we knew, meant to kill Penny. So they wouldn't reveal these things until flashbacks later on in the season. Well, although these flashbacks were great, I kind of think it would have been better had they just shown us these storylines at this time. Making us wait kind of took some of the sting out of them, as this was just tying up old storylines after the show had already moved on. And on island, it remained interesting with the time travel. We got a lot more interesting situations and dilemmas. We get this scene with the outrigger chase where they're on boats, and they're obviously in the time period shortly after Oceanic Six returned to the island that frankly looked around the time of when season 6 was going to take place, and they had originally planned this to tie into season 6, but then they changed their minds and apparently decided to go a different direction with the storyline, which I'll talk more about in my review of season 6. Anyway, I'm not sure whether to call this a failure of season 5 or a failure of season 6, but it's definitely a failure, and a huge one in my opinion. Some people write this off as, oh, who really cares who was shooting at them on the boats? But that's not the freaking point. The point is they set up a storyline within 2 years that they had remaining to them, and they couldn't even stick with that. I mean, the thing I really loved about the first 3 seasons of Lost is how they would set things up that would seem minor but then would pay off in a major way maybe a season or 2 later. And the last 3 seasons of Lost failed at doing this pretty badly, and they couldn't even pay off this plot line within 2 short seasons. I'm sorry, but that's bad story writing, plain and simple. We also get this pointless death with Charlotte, which I talked about in my season 4 review on how it pretty much rendered her character pointless. And we also get to see Rousseau and her French team come to the island. We finally get a payoff to Rousseau's line at the end of season 1, where she said a member of her team named Montan had lost his arm, and how she said that she had killed her team when they got sick. So I want to be clear here. I love these scenes. I mean, I loved them. They were some of my favorite moments of season 5. But I think these would have worked far better as flashbacks of Rousseau and from earlier, if they had this take place in earlier seasons. For example, in season 3, where we got 2 useless Kate flashbacks, the Saeed flashback story that we've seen a billion times, and the origin story of how Jack got his freaking tattoos. They should have taken some time out and given us a Rousseau flashback then, and I think it would have worked far better had they revealed, in a flashback rather than time travel, because having Jen involved was just a little far-fetched. Plus, we could have seen more from Rousseau's perspective. Seeing it from Jen's perspective was very limiting. Also, it's obvious they changed the whole idea of the sickness, which from the first couple of seasons was obvious it meant to be a physical sickness like a virus instead of a mental sickness like it was portrayed here. But the reason on why they changed it was obvious. They wanted to tie into the present storyline about the monster making people evil, which would pay off in season 6. But it blatantly doesn't fit with what they had established on the show. And then we get into Jen. So we're meant to believe that when the boat exploded, it threw Jen into the water, where he remained floating on a piece of debris, unconscious, but somehow managed to survive for several days, floating unconscious on a piece of debris with no one around him to keep him from drowning. But all those other people from the boat who were getting their life vests on and were preparing to jump into the water should the boat explode, they all died. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call bullshit on that. This is more example of them just wanting to kill off the background characters, but then have the main characters somehow miraculously survive. I don't buy it for an instant. So, in these set of episodes, we also get the life and death of Jeremy Bentham, which I felt was an amazing episode and really eerie and revealed some really interesting revelations. That being said, it didn't do much to push the plot forward. It was mainly about how Locke failed to get everyone to return to the island with him, which we already knew about like forever ago. But as I said, still a really great episode, but you might have guessed, I had a few problems with this as well. First off, they killed off Matthew Abaddon after teasing him from time to time in season 4. We finally get to meet him, and I think he's going to become an important part, and they just kill him off. He's one of the first in a series of pointless deaths, which would only get worse moving forward into Season 6. The other is how Locke went to see Walt. He didn't invite him to come back to the island. That makes completely no sense and is totally not in keeping with everything that's been established in the show. The excuse Locke gave is, oh, the boy's been through enough. But what's been clearly established is, number one, Locke thinks that the best thing for Walt is to be on the island, so he wouldn't see Walt returning to the island as furthering his problems but solving it. And number two, Walt wants to be on the island. He didn't really want to leave in the first place, so he would inquire to Locke about returning to the island. Anyway, it seems to me that the writers had originally intended on bringing Walt back as they had him off island as the child actor grew up. But once the show jumped forward in time, his growth could be explained, and they set him up in the Season 4 finale as going to Hurley, like he was going to be involved in the overall plot taking place in LA. But instead, they just threw us this obligatory scene trying to explain what he meant about Jeremy Bentham coming to visit him, but it just doesn't fit at all. If I were to guess, I would say that the writers had originally intended for Walt to return with the Oceanic Six, but for some unknown reason changed their minds and didn't want Walt back into the show. So, personally, I think this was a very bad choice, and I think the show would have been much better had they brought Walt back as a main character. It would have gone a long way to tie the later seasons back to the earlier seasons and not make many of the scenes there feel so pointless. But that's just me. Anyway, despite all my nitpicky little complaints, I absolutely loved the first half of Season 5, and it felt like it provides some of the most intense and best storytelling of the entire series. The second half of Season 5, however, is where they lose me. When I was first watching Season 5, I was eagerly anticipating them going back to the Dharma times because I thought it would be really awesome and we'd learn a lot of secrets of the island and about the Dharma Initiative, and that would tie into present-day storyline in very interesting ways. But instead, it was simply boring. It was a bunch of 70s hippie stereotypes running around saying namaste. We didn't learn jack shit about the island. Nothing interesting was set up for the future. It was a gigantic disappointment. And a big part of why my expectations were so high was because a video that the producers of the show released at Comic-Con over the summer before Season 5 aired. Now, if you weren't watching the show while it was airing, you might not be aware, but before Season 4 was aired, a video clip was released at the Comic-Con showing the outtakes of the orientation video of the orchid, the orchid orientation video that explained time travel. Although it wasn't the exact video that was used in the Season 4 finale, it was a version of the same video, and thus set up the whole concept of the orchid station and time travel. At Comic-Con, before Season 5, they released a video with Marvin Candle, or Pierre Chang, as his name was revealed to be for the first time in this video. And instead of telling you about it, I'll play you the relevant part of that video.
I have one chance at this. And I am a professor of theoretical astrophysics from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was brought to the godforsaken island years ago to conduct experiments to study the Kerr metric solution of the Einstein field equations, and to, if I can keep this pinhole open long enough, you should be receiving my message roughly 30 years. If you're this now, the American president is a man named George W. Bush. You share digital information instantaneously on something called internet. And unfortunately, my colleagues and I are all dead. Kind of violent purge. One that we are apparently powerless to escape. This information comes to me from a source that has proven itself to be credible.
None of that matters. Doesn't matter. Just get to it. Please.
Regardless, if this transmission is successful, it's proof the work I've been doing here is valid. This place, it has extraordinary properties. I'm begging you, no matter what's happened, it's imperative that the Dharma Initiative be reconstituted. You have to continue the research, then you have to do it now. Time is not just of the essence. It is the essence. Perhaps you'll be able to find a way to save us, to change the past, and to... Please. You have to stop what's about to happen. You can't let us...
This is useless. Alright? They're never gonna see this, Pierre. How do I turn this off?
What are you doing?
So, going into Season 5, this is what I was expecting to see. Well, maybe not that clip exactly, but some form of that storyline where Marvin Candle teams up with Daniel Faraday, who explains he's from the future, and together they find a way to communicate with the future, with possible indications of the Dharma Initiative returning to the island in present times. And the opener of Season 5 that showed Faraday together with Marvin Candle seemed to back up the storyline, but sadly, none of these things that looked so incredibly and ridiculously awesome happened. It was later said that the producers of the show changed their minds and decided to take Season 5 in a different direction, making that video obsolete. Which really has me thinking that the writers didn't really know what the hell they were doing in Season 5, and ultimately I would say botched it. This storyline always, and to this day, seemed like it would be infinitely more interesting than the one they actually went with. Every time I see that scene where Sawyer tells Jack he's in the Dharma Initiative and Jack says, they're back, and Sawyer is like, no, we're back. And that has me thinking that I would be infinitely more interested in if the Dharma Initiative returned to the island in present times rather than seeing characters travel back in time to the 70s to be in the Dharma Initiative. Because, it never sat right with me that the Dharma Initiative just disbanded after the Purge, as they were still a large group involved off the island who were presumably survived. There was still the DeGroots who dreamed up the whole thing, and Oliver Hanzo who funded it. It doesn't seem like they just throw up their hands after the Purge and be like, oh well, guess we'll just give up. I mean, it would be a huge setback to be sure, having their entire on-island team be killed and the others take over their stations. It would take them years to recover for something like that. Say about maybe 20 years, so that's right around the time Season 6, so, they'd be ready to retake the island. That kind of storyline I very strongly feel would have been infinitely better than the one we got in the second half of Season 5 and Season 6. If, for example, the video that was shown at Comic-Con that year was indicating that the storyline they'd actually do was the one that they did about Faraday and Jack trying to change the future so that the plane never crashed, I wouldn't have been excited at all. I'd be like, that looks really dumb. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Getting back to the start of the second half of Season 5, we have yet another example of the producers using the will of the island as a be-all, end-all excuse to do whatever they want, regardless of whether or not it makes any frickin' sense. Where when the Azura flight returns to the island, Jack, Hurley, Kate, and Saeed just happen to travel back into the exact point in time where Sawyer and the others are. And only those four travel back. Ben, Sun, Lapidas, they stay behind with all the other background characters. Why? Well, because the will of the fucking island. Ugh. Come on, give me a break. Okay, Lindelof's excuse for this bullshit was because they failed to reconstruct the circumstances of the original 815 flight, and because of that there were unforeseen consequences, and those consequences just so happened to be sending four main characters back in time to meet the other main characters while keeping Sun in present times so she's not reunited with Jen. Yeah, nah, sorry, that's fucking stupid. I don't buy this at all. All this is sloppy writing, and I'm sorry, but I can't forgive them for this one, especially because what follows isn't all that great anyway. So, another problem I have is the 3-year jump. I always hate it when shows will all of a sudden jump forward in time, and the characters will be in completely different situations. In this case, in the episode LaFleur, the remaining survivors, Sawyer, Juliet, Faraday, Miles, and Jen, their storyline instantly jumps 3 years in the future, where Sawyer and Juliet are lovers. Miles has become Sawyer's right-hand man. Jen speaks really good English, and Faraday has disappeared back to the mainland. This, as in other cases, I'm specifically thinking about Battlestar Galactica Season 3 finale that instantly jumped a year in time. Anyway, they all have a way of disorientating the audience and make them feel disconnected from the characters that they thought they knew. And in my mind, the show never recovered from this. Sawyer in particular felt like a completely different character before and after the jump. If you think about it, they only spent 100 days, which is a bit more than 3 months, in all of seasons 1 through 4. Now all of a sudden they spent 3 years in the Dharma Initiative in the 70s. That means Sawyer and Jen spent way more time with the Dharma folk than they did with the island survivors, meaning they should really have a bit more loyalty towards them. I mean, they kind of did a 3-year jump with the Oceanic Six, but not really, because we actually get to see glimpses of those 3 years through flash forwards in season 4. So there's not a 3-year gap. We did get the highlights of that time period. So in other words, I would have been okay with the island storyline had they done something more along those lines when the first half of season 5, instead of closely following the group for 5 or 6 days and then all of a sudden jumping 3 years in the future. If they were moving a lot more quickly throughout those 3 years, showing us glimpses of what they've been up to through that whole period, I would have been much more okay with that, just like I was okay with what they did with the Oceanic Six. But this sudden jump in time is something I never really recovered from, and it really made me care less about those particular characters. But the second half of season 5 wasn't all bad. We get one of the best episodes of the entire series, Dead is Dead, where we get Ben's epic backstory, his relationship with Widmore, and we see him come face to face with the role he played in Alex's death. We got this intriguing storyline with Alana and her lackeys who were on some sort of mission, but you don't know why or who they are or what they want. And we got a few good flashbacks, as I alluded to earlier, about Ben trying to kill Penny, but getting his ass whooped by Desmond instead. And my personal favorite, the Kate flashbacks, where I think are the best Kate flashbacks of the entire series, where we see why she left Aaron behind. And to me, that scene where she says goodbye to him is one of the most touching scenes in the entire series. But you'll notice I didn't mention anything involving the Dharma Initiative storyline, and that's because for the most part I found it really boring. I mean, the whole thing with Saeed shooting Ben, I thought this was a waste of time. Some people were shocked, thinking, oh, maybe young Ben will die and that will change the future, and it will be like Back to the Future, where people will just disappear. But who would think that? It was more than obvious that somehow Ben would survive, and in fact Saeed's actions would reinforce what made Ben Ben. Anyone who couldn't see that coming from miles away wasn't paying attention to the bazillion times they said whatever happened happened, so I was just bored at these parts. But speaking of their inability to change the past, let me get to the final set of episodes where Daniel Faraday, after repeating whatever happened over and over and over and over again, suddenly changes his mind and thinks he can change the past if he does something really major. And instead of getting this team up with Faraday and Marvin Candle, or Pierre Chang, however you want to call him, Faraday just dies. Oh, that death pissed me off so much. They were talking about the upcoming Faraday flashback episode like it was going to be epic, and there was indeed a lot of things about that episode I did like. But overall, it introduced the concept of changing the past of the A-15, never crashed, and it killed off my favorite new character. Yes, I thought the storyline of Mrs. Hawkins always knowing her whole life she'd kill her son and having to set things in motion for this to happen was cool in a dark way. I still really didn't want them to kill Faraday. I thought it was really out of character the way he charged into the other's camp with the gun, but hey, they had to set it up so Mrs. Hawkins would kill him, so I guess, plot convenience. And we also get the dumbest answer in the history of the show of Lost, and that is the answer to the question, what is the deal with with Mrs. Hawkins? How can she see into the future? For the longest time, I didn't think that this answer, this was answered. Someone had to point out to me, and at first I didn't believe them because it was so stupid. It didn't fit at all. But we're supposed to believe that because Eloise Hawking of the past got a hold of Faraday's journal of the future, that's how she could see into the future. Really? I mean, really? That's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever seen. Go back and watch that scene from the first, when she first appears to Desmond and flashes before your eyes in season 3. She knew a dude with red shoes was going to die. Don't tell me she read that in Faraday's fucking journal. Horseshit! The whole way she behaved that, as she knew for certain that everything was what was going to happen in the future. It seemed more like she had some sort of power like Jacob. And that's the only explanation I would have accepted. If she had gained some abilities from the island like Walt or Hurley or Jacob, or having, just having a journal from the future just does not fit. Not in the slightest, not in the least bit. It's bullshit. So I'll take a break from ranting and about what I didn't like and talk about something else that I did really like, and that was Jack's transformation in season 5. This is the one character development I felt they really earned over the course of the 5 seasons, on how he became the man of faith that Locke used to be. After so many years of fighting with him and doubting him, that transformation I felt was great. But he decided to put his energies into erasing the past. So Jack thinks it's his destiny to change the past so they never come back to the island in the first place. That too is stupid. So getting to the final episode of the season, The Incident, this to me is by far the least effective season finale of the entire series, and thus my least favorite. It didn't totally suck though. The best thing that it had going for them were the flashbacks with Jacob, which were absolutely amazing. It was so awesome to finally meet Jacob, and the way we met him, particularly with the opening scene where he's talking to the man in black about the statue. This is one of the best scenes in all of Lost. And then seeing him pop up in various characters off island in the past, in their flashbacks at different times of their lives, it was just amazing. Everything else about this episode was not so good. The whole storyline with Jack trying to set off the bomb was a bit silly. His whole mission to change the past was dumb because you knew it wouldn't succeed. If it did, that would fucking suck. You don't want to erase the first 5 seasons of a show you love. Then you feel like you just wasted your whole time. You kind of knew it would simply blow the survivors back into the present. So the whole thing was a lot of melodrama with big overblown action sequences. And the present day storyline wasn't that much better with Locke wanting to kill Jacob. That was really weird. And when it was revealed Locke was really dead and that it was actually the smoke monster, that too upset me. I didn't want Locke to die. But I guess it made sense in the terms of the overall story. It was kind of cool when Jacob saw Locke and was like, "So, you finally found your loophole?" And he was like, "Indeed I have." But other than those Jacob flashbacks, which were epic, this episode was really meh. So, time to give my rating for Season 5, which is a bit hard because I would give the first half of Season 5 a 9 or a 10, whereas I would give the second half of Season 5 a 4 or a 5. So I decided to split the difference and give Season 5 a 7. Very good. The first half of Season 5, even though I had some issues with it, was amazing, and it did things I never thought the show would do, and it was a delight to behold. Plus, it moved at a pace that was much more intense than anything previous that the show had done. The second half, on the other hand, was mostly disappointing, and life in Dharma times ended up being really boring and pointless, and it relied far too heavily on the island did it ex machina. So that's it for my review of Season 5 of Lost. You should check out my channel for other Lost videos, including a video where I count down my top 10 favorite episodes of Lost. I'll be doing a Season 6 review and a review of Lost overall eventually as well, so make sure you subscribe to keep up with all that, and thanks a lot for watching.